You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. We are going to kick off our show answering all the questions that you sent me on Twitter as we do a Mailbag Friday. We're going to push it, of course, right here to Saturday. And we're going to talk about Salvador Perez's long slump. And lastly, one last college prospect that I like ahead of Sunday's Major League Baseball draft. All that is coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day. And you can do that on all of our podcasting platforms, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. You also can check us out on YouTube as well. Just be sure to follow along and subscribe. We had big numbers this week. Continue to surge. Had a lot of followers on Twitter, a lot of followers of the podcast, lots of downloads. The numbers are really increasing here in our first 2 weeks or so of the Locked On Royals podcast on the Locked On Network. Now, before we get into our mailbag segment, I know it's a little bit different because I'm going to start tweeting those out on Friday and answering them later on that evening, but due to some scheduling conflicts, had to push the show to Saturday morning. We want to give a shout out to Gametime, who is today's title sponsor. I've got an experience that I had just as early as last week trying to get tickets last minute. Went through Gametime. They were super easy. It was easy to go through. Simple process. Didn't have to wait too long to get my tickets. Didn't have to wait to stress around or have to worry about could I get 1, 2, 3, or 4. It was all a simple process. Got it done in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. So Gametime is the way to go if you are going to get tickets last minute. This can be baseball games. That can be a concert, a comedy show. Really, whatever you need, Gametime is the place to go. And I'm going to tell you about some of my experiences with it coming up in here about 10 minutes or so. But to kick off today's show, and we are going to do this moving forward for our Friday segments. We're going to call them Mailbag Fridays. I'm always going to pose these questions on Twitter out there. And you can direct message me if you don't want to have your question in the Twitter comments public to everybody else. You always can direct message me. I've got my inbox open. You can just tweet at me. You can comment on the YouTube page. I'm going to try to do my best to get everybody's questions answered. They won't always be in the video. I might just respond to you immediately. It really depends on how many questions that we get. But every single Friday, we're going to open it up. I'm going to have a Mailbag Friday. You can ask me pretty much anything. It can be about the team. It can be about the farm system. It can be about the Major League Baseball draft. It can be about J.J. Piccolo, John Sherman. I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to give you a shout out in the podcast. So it might be a little bit fun for you, of course. But we're going to start doing that every single Friday, just calling them Mailbag Fridays. Don't need to overthink the wording for it. It's simple. You'll know how to do it. Kind of like Gametime, to give another shout out to our title sponsor today for today's show of Locked On Royals. Let's get right into it. Don't want to wait too much longer because I already had to push back these questions one day. Now, I put this out on Friday afternoon to give people time before I actually went and recorded the podcast. And we already got a couple of comments. We got about 4 questions to go over today, and that will be 5 to 10 minutes here. And I think I can give some pretty good answers here to those that reached out to me. Now, the first one we're going to go with here is from Jackson, who asked me the question about 2 of the top high school shortstops in the Major League Baseball draft, and that's Arjun Namal and Colin Houck. Which guy I would prefer? These both are really interesting cases, and I think you can always see the upside with a high school bat, a prep bat. I'm much more in favor of a prep bat than I really am for a prep pitcher. I know that Meyer has been the talk at least a couple times in some mock drafts going to Kansas City, but I'll be quite honest with you. I don't see Meyer having higher than a 10 to 15% chance being selected by Kansas City. I have a pretty good grasp as to who they're going to go with, just a gut feeling here. I think it's kind of down to Blake Mitchell, the prep hitting catcher. I know there's a stigma against prep hitting catchers, but also Kyle Teal. Remember, we had our first preview of the Major League Baseball draft and the guy that we like, Kyle Teel was 1A for me. I've now seen about 3, 4, I think even 5 mock drafts of Kyle Teel falling to Kansas City, which would be a home run. We've seen reports that the Royals have been in a lot of contact with Kyle Teel, a lot of contact with Blake Mitchell. So I don't think Noble Meyer would be the guy there. But for these shortstops, Arjun Namal and Colin Houck, I think I would go with Arjun Namal over Colin Houck. It's so tough to tell from time to time when you have prep hitting shortstops. They're so young. It can always be tough to profile that player, what they're going to be 3, 4 years down the road. But you know they have the upside. There's a lot to work with there. I know a couple of years back, the Royals went with Frank Mozzicato with their first pick, a bit of an underslot, but that's a prep arm. Now, at the time, I didn't really like it, but it's showing that at least early on, it could have been the right pick. It's seemingly looking like a pretty effective pick as long as the guys they took in rounds 2, 3, and 4 hit as well. But for Arjun Namal, I don't think this is a very high chance the Royals would select him, but if they did, I really do like what he can, I guess, be in the future. He is a guy that I think you could move him around. That's the thing, too, with high school shortstops. That doesn't mean they're going to stick there. Of course, Bobby Witt Jr. stuck there because he was your second overall pick. But that doesn't always mean they're going to stick there. Mike Moustakas was a shortstop. Hunter Dozier was a shortstop. They're athletic. It's the best player on the field in high school. That's where the shortstop plays, and you can always move them around. But I just like Arjun Namal a little bit more. His scouting report, really good with the raw power, I think. He does remind me, I saw a tweet of this morning, actually, kind of comparing him to a very young Alfonso Soriano. He's 17 years old, 6'1", 170, kind of across the board, all pretty even. Good fielder, good contact, good speed. Overall is a 55 grade prospect. I just like Namal a little bit more than I do with Colin Houck, who's out of Georgia. A little bit of a bigger build, committed to Mississippi State, about 6'2", 190, nearing 200 pounds. I think the hit tool's a little bit better. The arm is incredible for Colin Houck, but I think I like the toolsiness a little bit more of Arjun Namal. If it was my pick, I wouldn't be upset if the Royals went that route. And Colin Houck certainly is going to be a guy I think that moves over. The arm is incredible. The power, kind of like Namal, is very raw. So I do like Houck. I'm not saying I don't like Colin Houck, but if it were my pick, I had to pick between those two guys, I think I would go with Arjun Namal. So that was a question from Jackson on Twitter. The second question we got was from Kurt Klein on curious of my take why the Royals are committed to running MJ Melendez out there daily with his season long of limited production. We did a podcast on this. We did a show on this, and you can always check it out on all our podcasting platforms on YouTube. The Royals need to see a full season of a lot of these young guys. And whether it's good or bad, you have to kind of run it into the ground. I think at this point, it's not going to hurt MJ Melendez to have maybe a month in Omaha, correct some things, because the approach is brutal right now. There's nothing he's doing well at the plate. The power's not there. The strikeout numbers are up. The walk rate is not very high. He's in a very long slump, like the guy we're going to talk about in our second segment, in Salvador Perez. But the Royals are nearly 40 games under 500. There's not really another guy out there that is just being blocked by MJ Melendez. MJ Melendez is supposed to be a part of your young core. So you got to see what he can give you. Now, right now, in 2023, we see a below-average defender. We see a below-average bat. We see below-average power. He's not projecting a long-term piece for this lineup. I think that MJ Melendez is more of a stopgap guy now, but this year there's no pressing matter for you. There's no guy that he's taking at bats from. So why they're running him out there every single day? It's an evaluation year. You have to see exactly what you have in MJ Melendez. If it's not there, you move on next year. If you're wanting to compete next year, then MJ Melendez maybe isn't a part of your future outlook because it's been a bad sophomore slump. He can always improve. He's young, but I don't know if it's going to be up at the Kansas City level. I'm for a demotion to Omaha to correct some things, take some pressure off. But at the same time, I just don't know who you throw out there that really needs more at-bats than MJ Melendez. I don't think Dairon Blanco does. I'm not sure Samad Taylor does. I know he's in Omaha right now. Nate Eaton doesn't. Edward Olivares doesn't. Like, MJ Melendez has to get those at-bats, but something has to change. An all-star break is needed. Maybe a second half can show some signs for improvement. But yeah, that's why I think they're running MJ Melendez out there every single day. You're 40 games under 500. It's an evaluation year. He was supposed to be a part of your core, so you need to make sure before you make any tough decisions, is he a part of it or is he not? The only way you find that out is by playing him nearly every single day. The next question I got was from Royals Farm Report, one of our good friends out there on Twitter. This was a fun one. This really was one I wanted to take more time to answer with because it's very fitting coming off my latest podcast episode of which three guys I would extend. And I said Vinny Pasquantino, I said Maikel Garcia, and Bobby Witt Jr. And Royals Farm Report, tweeted this at me. Between Vinny, Bobby, and Maikel, you got to trade one, extend one, and wait and see on one for the offseason, assuming the market value extension and trade return. So I have to extend somebody, I have to trade somebody, and wait and see. I think I'm going to stick with my gut here. I'm going to extend Vinny Pasquantino. He was my first guy I was going to extend anyway, so I'm going to extend Vinny Pasquantino. I don't think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to sign. That's the thing. I don't think he's going to sign this year, is what I mean, not long term. I think that he will down the road, but he's definitely betting on himself at this point. And if I'm having to pick between Maikel Garcia and Bobby Witt Jr., I am still going to pick Bobby Witt Jr., so that does lead me to trade Maikel Garcia. I'm not going to trade Vinny Pasquantino because I feel like you need that bat in the lineup. I think you get some pretty good value for Maikel Garcia. It hurt me. I'm in the Maikel Garcia fan club. I definitely would not want to see him play for another team, but I'm not sure you trade Bobby Witt Jr. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is the guy that you've always went out there and said he's the one you want to build around. He's the cornerstone piece. Maikel Garcia has more so been a really good surprise. He was a great prospect, but he wasn't a prospect like Bobby Witt Jr. Bobby Witt Jr. is quietly pacing for like a 25 home run season, 47 stolen bases, something like that. That's something I don't think I'm willing to trade away. And I think if you really tapped into the potential, Bobby Witt Jr. could be a multiple-time All-Star. I think Maikel Garcia will get to a couple All-Star games if he progresses the way that we're all expecting him to. But overall, I think if I had to pick between Witt Jr. and Maikel Garcia, I am going to go with Bobby Witt Jr. I like the pop there, I like the power there. The glove, of course, is not as good as Maikel Garcia's, but the power, the speed, I got to keep that here in Kansas City more so than maybe Maikel Garcia and his glove and his bat right now. Maikel Garcia is having a better year, but long-term, I think I'm going to bank on Bobby Witt Jr. more. So I'm going to sign Vinny Pasquantino. I know what he's going to be. I feel pretty confident in that. I'm going to wait and see with Bobby Witt Jr., and then I'm going to trade Maikel Garcia, try to get some pitching prospects. That's how you have to do it, right? That's the philosophy that I at least live by, that you draft hitters, you sign hitters, then you trade them for pitching. You can buy pitching. You develop hitters. So I'm hoping the Royals do in the draft. So I'm hoping the Royals do moving forward when you are making those trades. And I know sometimes you can trade pitching for pitching, but the way I think the best process is you draft hitters, you develop hitters, you flip those hitters or those prospects for pitching. And that's what I think the Royals are going to start doing moving forward. So that is our Mailbag Friday segment. I know we pushed it to Saturday, but that's how we're going to do it. You can direct message me. You can tweet at me. I'm going to try to answer every single question that I can in a timely manner. And if I can't get to it, I promise you, I'm going to tweet back, respond to you so I can give you my thoughts because, as I always want to say, you, the followers, you, the listeners, you're what makes this thing go. It ain't me. I'm just here talking into a microphone. You give me the content. You give me the talking points. That's what I want to have here on Locked On Royals. Don't go anywhere because now we got to talk about the captain of this team, Salvador Perez. He is in a bad slump. Are the Royals doing the right thing by running him out there every single day? We just discussed MJ Melendez, but what about Salvador Perez? That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned in to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson. Follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before talk about Salvador Perez and his struggles and the Royals lineup, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Gametime. Now, I got a little bit of a story for you. Last weekend, I was going to the Royals-Dodgers game, and I wanted to go last minute. I was going with a couple buddies. Didn't really feel like, though, I had to stress. I didn't want to stress about getting tickets. I know in a season like this, the tickets are going to be available. But I wanted a quick, easy process, and Gametime was the way I went. had all the tickets ready at my disposal. They were easy to get. It was simple. And that's why I use Gametime for any tickets that I'm going to go out there and purchase, whether that be a Royals game, whether that be going to a concert, whether that be going to a comedy show. I'm going to go through Gametime for all of my ticket purchasing. Now, here's what you got to do. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On MLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Who wouldn't want that? $20 off on your first purchase of any ticket. The terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem the code Locked On MLB for $20 off. So step one, download Gametime today. Right after you watch this podcast, download Gametime and start using it for all of your ticket purchasing. It's last-minute tickets with the lowest price guaranteed. That is Gametime. Salvador Perez has been in a long, and I mean a month-long, 2-month-long slump. In the middle of all this, there's been an eye procedure. He's been banged up taking foul balls and bats off his shoulder and knees and abdomen and helmet and all of that. And Salvador Perez is also 33 years old. He is the captain. He wears the C on his chest above the lettering. He is the fan favorite. He is the face of this franchise. It's been that way for quite some time. I always talk about Salvador Perez's smile, how recognizable it is, no matter how bad the team is. He's got the same energy. He's got the same, I would say, vibes around him. He's got the same positivity. That's what a captain is. For the young guys, for the veterans, for the coaching staff, for the fans, he doesn't let it be known that he's hurting, that he doesn't want to be there. And I think Salvador Perez wants to be here. He loves Kansas City. He's won a ring here. He's been a multiple-time All-Star. He's going to be representing Kansas City in the All-Star game coming up this week. It's a big honor for him. By all accounts, Salvador Perez is going to go down as one of the more famous Royals players of all time. At the same time, there can be times we discuss why maybe playing him every day or putting him behind the plate every single day is counterproductive. Right now, and maybe you are still watching the Royals, maybe you're not. But right now, if you are, you're watching these games, Salvador Perez is actively hurting the Royals lineup. And I get that an all-star break is coming up. Rest is needed. And I'm not saying Salvador Perez is a bad baseball player. He's hurt. He's banged up. He's coming off the eye procedure, and it's been ugly since that eye procedure. It's a lot going on with Salvador Perez. And from my standpoint, I would like to see Salvador Perez play in Kansas City 2 to 3 more years. I think that's a pretty healthy amount of time considering his age. A 33-year-old catcher, bigger body, bigger frame. You don't play until you're 42. And you want to talk about Yadier Molina and compare Salvador Perez to him. He's not. Yadier Molina wasn't as big as Salvi. He wasn't much of a power hitter as Salvi, but we also saw the last couple of years for Yadi in St. Louis. He was a shell of his former self. Salvador Perez, I don't think he's going to get to that point, and the power's still there. He's still got 15, 16 home runs on the season. But do you want Salvador Perez to continue doing that for the next couple of years? The way you do it is by taking him off his feet when you are this bad. Nearly 40 games under 500. Salvador Perez, in his last 30, has a triple slash of 177, 225, and a 274 slug for arguably your biggest power hitter. In his last 7 games, Salvador Perez is 3 for 25, no home runs, and an RBI, 9 strikeouts. That is a triple slash of 122.41 and the slug of 120. No extra base hits. It's a struggle at the plate right now. Now, overall in the year, Salvador Perez is far below some of his average numbers. He is striking out 24.7% of the time. That is the second highest in his career. His ISO is 190. His batting average on balls in play is 282. His on base is 286, which would be his lowest mark since 2018. His WRC plus is under league average. This is a below average hitter right now. And the best thing for Salvador Perez at his age is not running him out there every single day. For MJ Melendez, which we discussed in our mailbag segment, for MJ Melendez, you can run him out there every single day. It may hurt the lineup, but you have to see what you have in MJ Melendez. Salvador Perez, We know what Salvador Perez is, what he brings to this lineup, how valuable he is. But this is not a valuable version of Salvador Perez. The triple slash is ugly. The on-base numbers, they've never been high for Salvador Perez, but it's a lot lower this year. And it's been a pretty long stretch of bad play from Salvador Perez. This All-Star break is very much needed. I do think that Salvador Perez is going to have a surge right after the All-Star break because he's going to get that rest. We discussed this, though, in the Freddie Fermin podcast. It was our third or fourth episode I think we had on Locked On Royals. But Freddie Fermin can do the catching behind the plate. He's a better defensive catcher at this point in his career and Salvy's career behind the plate. Framing, advanced metrics, all of that. Salvador Perez can be your DH. Salvador Perez can get off his feet, rest him a little bit, make sure the offensive numbers come back around before you can put him behind the plate again. And I don't know how nagging this eye procedure thing is, or how much that's really affecting him. I'd imagine a lot, because this is a pretty bad stretch for Salvador Perez. I don't remember a stretch this bad over the last 5 years. Swinging and missing a lot. I know Salvy likes to swing at nearly everything, but this is a different breed. This is a different animal. This has been a very bad 2 months for Salvador Perez. And throwing him out there every single day is not productive. When you're 40 games under 500 and you have a 33-year-old catcher you'd like to see be in the middle of your lineup for the next 2 years, you're not going to get a productive version of him if he's beaten into the ground. I'll give Mike Matheny credit. That's going to sound weird in a podcast where he's, a year removed from being the manager. But what he did for Salvador Perez in 2021 was very important. When Salvi had 48 home runs, had the most home runs by a catcher since Johnny Bench, I believe it was. He DH'd him a lot. He gave him time to rest and only worry about hitting. And that was big for his game. He was more durable, played in more games. That's what I'd like to see in the second half. Salvy's got to get up off his feet, because if he's going to continue this bad stretch of play, it's only going to continue to hurt this lineup tremendously. And right now, it is hurting this lineup tremendously. I'd like to see a nice reset for him after the All-Star break, get him some rest. But after that, I'd like to see the focus be on hitting, DH him a lot. He can certainly catch every other day or maybe once every 3 days. But first things first, it's about worrying about that offensive power, those offensive numbers. It's about worrying about that. Salvi knows that. His coaching staff knows that. Right now, though, man, it has been an ugly stretch for the captain of the Kansas City Royals. Before we go, I want to give you one last college prospect that I like ahead of the Major League Baseball draft on Sunday. I'll also be on Royals Farm Report's Twitter Spaces tomorrow morning around 9:30 to give you some last thoughts I have before the Royals make that selection on Sunday evening. But the guy that I like is Enrique Bradfield Jr. The numbers don't pop like the first three guys I gave you. On base, yes. Walk numbers, yes. Batting average, not so much. Power, not so much. Speed, absolutely. And the glove is a Gold Glove level. I'm not going to say potential. It's a Gold Glove level right now. If he was an outfielder for a major league team, he could compete for a Gold Glove. He already seems like a Royal. So when we come back, let me tell you about Enrique Bradfield Jr., the outfield out of Vanderbilt. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. This is our last show of the week. And I wanted to give you one last prospect that I really like ahead of the Major League Baseball draft, and that is Enrique Bradfield Jr., an outfielder, a junior out of Vanderbilt. As I said earlier in the podcast, the batting average, that's such a bad stat to look at, I believe. You always want to look at on-base numbers, maybe slugging, OPS, WRC plus, walk rate. Simple numbers, I would say. Batting average is far too simple for me, at least when I'm trying to prove a point. So this past year at Vanderbilt, Enrique Bradfield Jr. / 279, 410, 429. That's the lowest OPS and slug that I've talked about. The OPS for Bradfield Jr. is 839, 873 in his college career, 839 for Vanderbilt this past year. That's the lowest by a wide margin of the first three guys I gave you. That's the lowest slug at 429. And it's the lowest batting average I've given you. So as a pure hitter, he's the fourth best, which is why he's my fourth prospect. But he's walked 45 times, struck out only 40, similar to Matt Shaw's numbers, but Matt Shaw had far more power, 24 bombs for Maryland. Enrique Bradfield Jr. only had 6 home runs for Vanderbilt. 34 RBIs, but the speed, you can combine all 3 of the first guys. None of them would equal up to Enrique Bradfield Jr., who had 37 stolen bases, was caught 7 times for the Commodores this year. To me, though, it's the defense. That is a Gold Glove center fielder. And he's a bit, I would say, of an underslot pick. If the Royals are trying to make a deal or cut a deal, which it seems like that's what they wanted to do, if Kyle Teal's not there, maybe if Blake Mitchell's not there, they'd want to cut a deal. This could be a guy I think that you could cut a deal with, and Enrique Bradfield Jr. That defense is phenomenal. That's a leadoff hitter. The Royals have some ties to Vanderbilt in drafting Javier Vaz last year, who's been a great, tremendous find, a 15th rounder, and now hitting really well in his first year in professional ball, I guess his first full year of professional ball. But that's a leadoff hitter. Enrique Bradfield Jr. is a true leadoff hitter and a guy that is maybe the best defensive player out there in the Major League Baseball draft. He feels like a Royal. Speed, defense. Contact, I would say there. On base numbers, though, I like a lot. I really, really like a guy like Enrique Bradfield Jr. He's not going to be the one that I think many at the time will jump all over. No, he's not going to be the guy that oozes immediate potential that you think star, all-star, that's a can't-miss guy. You'd have to work with him a little bit, develop him, and I know Royals fans don't always have trust in that. But when you have this good of a glove, the bar offensively doesn't need to be astronomically high to be a very good player. If you're a slightly above average hitter and you have this defense, that is a 5-WAR type of player. That's something the Royals don't have. I mean, he's that good defensively, that good at wreaking havoc on the base path. You just become a league average hitter. That's incredibly valuable. And that, to me, feels like kind of a safe pick. You don't need to work on his defense. You don't need to move him around, and you don't have much depth at the outfield position. I'm not saying the Royals need to draft for positional need. You can't do that with guys that aren't going to be on your big league team for about 2 years. To me, though, this is a guy that could be a major league outfielder right now. He could impact a Major League Baseball team in July, in August, in September, in the postseason. He's that good. I've seen the highlights of this kid. I've actually seen him play in person one time. He is really good. Really, really, really good with the glove. He's a center fielder. He's got speed. I think he's a pure leadoff hitter. And he's a guy that doesn't need to be this incredible hitter like I think the first 3 guys have to be successful for Kansas City. Kyle Teal would have to. Matt Shaw would have to. Chase Davis would have to. Enrique Bradfield Jr., he's that good defensively that he can kind of be average at the plate. And that, to me, feels like a pretty safe pick. Now, for some Royals fans, you'll go, I don't want that. I don't want a defensive guru, a good base runner. We've had those before in Kansas City. I want a guy that can hit. I still think he can. It's just going to take a little bit more of a developmental process. He's not going to come in and have an OPS north of 1.200. I know that's an absurd number, but you get what I'm getting at here. He may not have the best triple slash in his first year. WRC plus may hang just over 100. Walk rate hopefully would be high. Strikeout numbers low like a Javier Vaz. There is connection there. And that's why it wouldn't shock me if the Royals went after a guy like Enrique Bradfield Jr. The Major League Baseball draft is coming up tomorrow night. Who are the Royals going to take? We've seen a lot of smoke around Blake Mitchell, the prep hitting catcher, and another catcher, and maybe one of the best pure hitters in all of college baseball, Kyle Teal. Also heard a slight rumor about Matt Shaw. That was interesting. Saw Royals Farm Report tweet that out. I'll be on his Twitter Spaces tomorrow morning at 9:30. But if you've checked out all of our podcasts, those are the 4 guys I really like for Kansas City. They take one of those 4, I'm not going to have any complaints whatsoever. But until then, you can just check out all of our podcast pages. You can check out the guys we talked about, the Salvador Perez slump. You can go over our thoughts on Alec Marsh, how the Royals can construct their bullpen, Michael Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino as extension candidates. All of that, check us out on the podcasting page, YouTube. You can't really miss us with Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. You enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the Major League Baseball draft, and we will talk to you on Monday. You take it easy, Kansas City.